Good afternoon, folks. Bringing you a Fury Warrior guide for the Legion expansion. Going to be covering rotation, regular talents, your artifact weapon tree, and your best stats for this expansion. So let's get it started with the talent tree. Level 15 talents. Biggest choice here, Endless Rage, giving your auto attacks, generating 30% additional rage. Don't bother with the other two. They're really subpar when it comes to high-end dungeon and even regular heroic dungeons, and eventually progressing into raids and high-end raids. You're going to want the extra rage, so go ahead and stick with that. Going to level 30 talent, Shockwave is great for Mythic Plus, and even some of the bosses in the raid content that you do need to stun the ads. Always nice to help mitigate some damage off the tanks, or save a healer's life if they get in the bad spot. Stormbolt is really dedicated to PvP and arenas. It's situationally okay in dungeons if you need to stun a specific ad, but in the grand scheme of things, Shockwave can do the same thing. And double time over here, giving you two charges of your charge, adding a little bit of mobility, even more mobility than warriors already have. So I tend to stick with Shockwave for Mythic Plus, and double time, I usually use that while I'm out in the world leveling. Going to level 45, Wrecking Ball and Avatar are your two best choices here. Avatar the same as it has been in the last couple expansions, giving you 20% increased damage, and removing all your roots and snares, also very solid in PvP. Wrecking Ball, you're looking at 200% increased damage from your Whirlwind when it procs from any attack, really. Always really good if you have a lot of ads consistently that you need AoE down, and Fury Warriors are really solid at AoE these days. So not a bad talent if you're in a specific fight that has a lot of ads. Level 60 talents, Warpaint. Every time you are enraged, now in this expansion, you take 20% increased damage, which does help you generate a little more rage. However, it does put a little more stress on your healers. In the grand scheme of things, 20% isn't terrible unless you're getting hit by those heavy attacks. This gives them a little breather, taking away 5% of that, considering that you want to be enraged as much as possible, and we'll go over that with our stat weights in a little bit. Bounding Stride reduces the cooldown of Heroic Leap by 15 seconds, and you get a little speed boost after you land by 3 seconds, adding even more mobility to the spec. And then Furious Charge, you're looking at Charge allowing Bloodthirst to be 300% more effective. Very nice for an on cooldown heal or an on-demand heal that you need. Warpaint, longevity-wise, is going to pull ahead, making you take less damage, but for leveling, I found this to be really nice. Tag teaming with double time, giving you 2 charges, then giving you 2 very solid Bloodthirst heals, which can heal a good amount. I mean, even saving 20% or 30% of your health bar. Really good. Level 75, really only 2 talents here worth taking. Carnage on the right side, reducing the cost of Rampage by 15 rage. A great spec, or a great talent for leveling and world questing, allowing you to get a little extra damage without having to rage cap. The other one that does pull ahead in both Mythic Plus and dungeon or raid content, Massacre. Every time you execute crits, it reduces the rage cost of your Rampage by 100%, and this can chain, which is very nice. So essentially, you're just in a burn phase of a boss, hitting execute and hopefully critting, and then doing a Rampage, keeping your enraged time up, and just swapping back and forth as much as possible. High-end content, this will definitely pull much farther ahead than Carnage. Level 90 talents, I pick Inner Rage because, in my opinion, it is the best of the 3 in this tier. Bloodbath is the same for the last couple expansions, giving you a little bit of a bleed on a 30-second cooldown, which used to be a minute cooldown. Not too bad. Frenzy is pretty much worthless, even though we are supposed to be stacking haste in this expansion. And Inner Rage is, by far, in my opinion, much better than either of these two. Raging Blow no longer requires being enraged and deals 150% increased damage, but now has a 4.5 second cooldown, which in the end will actually be reduced as much as you're stacking haste. I know with about 26% haste right now, mine has actually been reduced a full second, which is fantastic. And as you get up in gear levels and acquire more haste, going to be a lot faster. Finally, level 100 talents, Dragon Roar and Bladestorm are the same as the last couple expansions. Reckless Abandon is really the only new one. When you pop Battle Cry, it generates 100 rage. It's okay for on-demand burst, however, this class is incredibly bursty, so it's really not required. Dragon Roar, of course, does the same thing and does crit, and now makes you deal 20% additional damage for 6 seconds, which is fantastic. So let's go over the artifact weapon tree really quick. Of course, you're starting all the way up here. You get Odin's Fury, which is a glorified whirlwind with a dot. The first one you want to go all the way down is hug the very, very bottom. You want to hit Odin's Champion. That's the first golden you want to do. I've got my second golden here recently, since I'm bouncing between both Fury and Protection for my guild right now. Odin's Champion, every time, well, when you use Rampage, you have a chance to, essentially every attack after that, it reduces the cooldown of all your offensive abilities like Dragon's Roar, Battle Cry, Avatar, and not Blood Fury if you have a racial. It reduces the cooldown on those by 1 second for every attack you do during that. And I believe it lasts for 6 seconds, so if you're rampaging quite often, you can knock a lot of time off these big cooldowns, giving you additional burst and more consistent burst. After that, you want to go right to the next dragon. Of course, the golden dragon here, Juggernaut. Execute increases damage dealt by Execute increases damage dealt by Execute by 5% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 99 times. Now, I have never maxed this. I think the highest I've gotten is about 17 or 18 stacks before the boss died. However, it is fantastic with this, especially after you get this one up here, Sense Death. Execute has a 15% chance to make your next execute cost no rage. So essentially you can just chain executes if you get really, really lucky. Really fantastic, and once you go up here as well to get your last one, Rampage and Execute have a chance to activate Berserking, increasing your attack speed and crit chance by 3% every 1 second for 12 seconds, giving you 36% increased critical chance. I did have this in the very beginning, didn't proc as often as I like. Then again, I was doing it while I was leveling, so I really wasn't on boss fights that took enough time for me to notice the difference, but it is really, really solid. Alright, let's go over stat weights. So, in the last couple expansions, I would say 2, maybe even 3, if not more, crit has been the bread and butter for warriors this expansion, and that is no longer the case. The reason being, as they gave us Furious Slash. What this does, when you do this, this is aggressively strike your the enemy with your offhand weapon, dealing a decent amount of damage, and increasing your Bloodthirst critical strike chance by 15% until it deals a next critical strike, stacking up to 6 times. Essentially, you can force your Bloodthirst to crit if you keep stacking this. Now, hopefully you don't have to get to 6 stacks before you get your crit. I know right now at 850-ish gear level, my crit's only 19%, but that's because we're stacking haste now. And stacking haste, this one doesn't have a cooldown, but it is going to help your auto attacks generate more rage. On that topic, your primary rage dump, and I'm pretty sure your only rage dump in this expansion, is Rampage. Now, as spec'd as I am, if you go Carnage, it's going to cost, I believe, 70 rage instead of 85 rage if you go with Carnage. I usually stick with Massacre for Mythic Plus and raiding content. This is your rage dump, and every time you do this, it will cause you to be enraged. So let's go to the tree here. Your mastery is incredibly important, and it's really a moot mastery unless you can keep yourself enraged the entire time, or as much as possible. Your enrage actually now increases your attack speed by 100% and the damage you take, unfortunately by 15%, but taking a little bit more damage actually gives you more rage, which will keep you rampaging as much as possible, and hopefully critting with your Bloodthirst as much as possible as well. Really, the rotation is pretty simple. You want to use Raging Blow pretty much on cooldown, especially as you get higher levels in haste. This is going to be even less of a cooldown than it was originally. Usually it's 4.5 seconds, and it's going to be decreased as more haste you get. Bloodthirst is the same way, actually has the same cooldown. As you can see, I have 3.56 on either of these. So the more haste you get, the more often you're going to be able to use these, and the more often you're able to crit with Bloodthirst, the more often you're going to be enraged. Now, if you go back to your artifact weapon, one really important thing here is your auto attacks. Once you get this little this talent here, your auto attacks have no penalty to hit from dual wielding during enrage, meaning it ties really well in synergy with this. Since your auto attacks generate 30% additional rage, it ties really well with this, since they no longer have a penalty, because there is a penalty for dual wielding. I think you have like a 15% or 20% increased chance to miss because you get to dual wield, unfortunately. So keeping yourself enraged is incredibly important, especially once you get this talent here, because you're going to be hitting more often and generating more rage if you use the correct talent up here. That's really all it is. You want to crit as much with Bloodthirst as you can, Rampage as much as you can to keep yourself enraged, so you keep generating as much rage as possible, and then dumping it all with Rampage and using Raging Blow as much as possible. On top of all that, if that wasn't enough, Haste and the Odin's Champion, if you go back to your artifact weapon tree, when you do this, like I was saying earlier, it reduces the cooldown of these every time you use attack when this procs. So these are going to be coming up more often, which is great for our burst phases. And I mean, they have a pretty short cooldown, Dragon's Roar being only 25 seconds, which is going to be reduced a lot by Odin's Champion. Battle Cry, which is a 50-second cooldown, I'm pretty sure it's usually a minute. I don't know if Haste reduces that, but I don't think it does. But that's going to be reduced, as well as Avatar is being reduced. Now, you want to tie these in as much as possible with Dragon's Roar, since Dragon's Roar now makes you do 20% additional damage. And, of course, you want to try to tie in your racial if you're an Orc, or if you're a Troll, tie in that as much as possible with Dragon's Roar while you're dealing that 20% additional damage. I know it's like drinking through a fire hydrant, but it is a really, really fun playstyle. They're insane with cleaving damage, since every time you whirlwind, both your Rampage and your Bloodthirst deal 50% damage to 4 targets that are nearby, allowing you to do a lot of cleave damage. Very bursty, not as much single target damage as Arms is doing these days, though I personally find Arms incredibly boring and dull. This is a very engaged spec that I have loved for many, many years now. And I think it feels a lot more like a Fury Warrior this expansion than it has pretty much since Burning Crusade, if that dates me back to how long I've played. So, really, really fun spec. Main things to remember here: keep yourself enraged as much as possible by rotating between Rampage and Bloodthirst, so you can keep getting that extra rage, and of course keep rampaging to keep yourself enraged. Go for those first 2 golden dragons here, Odin's Champion and Juggernaut. I actually got focused in Chaos before I got my second dragon, because I thought it was incredibly important to do with how our talent is generating that 30% additional rage from auto attacks. And of course, once you get into higher gear levels, these 2 combos are incredible. With executes, critting, I mean, not as much as Arms in the grand scheme of things, however, we do execute with both weapons. And when that stacks, it can get up to insane numbers with executes, especially during the execute phase. So, really, really fun spec. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe on this channel if you like. If you want to see any other guides, please feel free to drop a comment below. You can also find me on my Twitch channel, which is in the my profile guide. As always, cheers.